My name's Barrett Berger, and I'm the director of the Center for the Advancement of Public Integrity, which we call CAPI, here at Columbia. Let's get started hearing from these guys. I want to start by talking about a few of the most recent corruption cases that we had here in New York. So last year, some of you may remember, there was a string of some lost trials and reversed convictions. And there was some that said this was sort of the death knell for public corruption cases. And much of this came after this 2016 Supreme Court decision that overturned the conviction of former Governor McDonnell and really narrowed the legal definition of corruption. So I want to start with you, Richard. Can you just give us a brief description of the McDonnell case and sort of how it affected our...
Sure. The McDonnell case, so most of these cases we're talking about are in some sense about bribery. The relevant federal laws deal with bribery, extortion, mail and wire fraud, which picks up something called theft of honest services. We can talk about what that means later. And then one of the cases, the Buffalo Billion case, Corey's going to focus on, has the wonderfully, if not satanically named, Section 666, which is so-called federal funds corruption, what happens when a state or local government that gets federal funds, official involvement that is involved in bribery above a certain level. So all of these things, or nearly all of them, involve the so-called quid pro quo. Let's call them the bribor, not a technical term, gives money to somebody in government, and the government official in turn does something for the bribor. Sometimes the bribor gives money to somebody else in whom the person in government has an interest, and that the person in government is interested in. For example, one of the cases we'll talk about today involving the former state Senate Majority Leader, the beneficiary was his son. Could be that benefits him since he doesn't have to support the kid anymore, but it was seen as him. The issue in the McDonnell case, which had the potential to reframe federal corruption law, it's not quite clear that it has, and we can talk more about that, is to figure out what is it that is improper for a government official to do, what is, to be running out of room here, to use the actual term, what's an official act? So, McDonnell's the newly elected governor of Virginia. There's this man, Williams. He runs a business called Star Scientific. Basically, he has this idea that you can do something with the nicotine and tobacco that will help treat arthritis. And he has this vision in this company, you can do that. He would like the state of Virginia to help him out, the Commonwealth of Virginia to help him out with his research, because he doesn't have he needs to get it funded, he needs to get FDA approval. So he is looking for Virginia, a big tobacco state, to use its research, find various ways, its universities and elsewhere, to help fund his work. And also, at one point, he has an idea that maybe his product can be picked up by the state's government health insurance program for its state employees. So he starts working the governor-elect, who becomes the governor. There are gifts. He buys the governor-elect's wife the gown that she's going to use at the inauguration. Basically, he floods the governor and the governor-elect with funds, $160,000, something like that. So there's clearly $160,000 going this way. He would like the governor to ultimately fund his work. I'm not sure this is on. It is on. To fund his work. The governor does a bunch of things. He has meetings with him. He tells one of his aides to have a meeting with him. He tells somebody at the Virginia University system to have a meeting with him. He talks to somebody who's the head of the government insurance program to think about it. He sponsors a luncheon at the executive mansion at which Mr. Williams is a guest. There's a famous thing where he has one conversation with Williams and then within 12 minutes sends an email to one of his aides saying, look into this, which he asks Williams for a loan. And Williams responds. Goes to trial, corruption. Question is, what did the government have to prove in order to establish the corruption? They had to prove an official act. What's an official act? And amongst the things that the government listed were a bunch of the things that I said. Meetings, phone calls, contacts with senior state employees, sponsoring the luncheon. And the question was, are each of those or any of those official acts? And the jury was charged that they could consider them. It didn't quite say that anything that a governor does is an official act, but it was all of these things that the governor was doing, having meetings with him, with Williams, or having phone calls, meeting with aides to talk about Williams, talking to people in the government about Williams, and sponsoring the luncheon. Were those the official acts? I should say in the end, the state actually gave him absolutely nothing. He never got the grant. He never got listed in the insurance program. The jury was charged that they could consider all these things to be official acts. And the Supreme Court's response unanimously was no. That's not quite right. The official act would be ultimately actually granting him the research, giving him the research grant, or directing that he be included in the insurance program. But that a meeting alone can't be an official act. The meeting could be part of the process leading to an official. It's a fairly subtle distinction. The meeting can be part of the process leading to the official act of approving a grant, signing a bill, issuing a directive. But a meeting or a phone call or a sponsored luncheon at the executive mansion is not by itself an official act. And so they concluded the jury instructions because it interferes too much in the ability of elected officials to do what elected officials do, which is meet with constituents and have public events. So there was a sense that it trenched too deeply into what elected officials do. So at that point, the Supreme Court reverses the conviction. He could have been retried. Ultimately, he was not. And that's what sort of shapes the cases that we're going to talk about. Two leaders, wonderful coincidence, the two leaders of the New York State Legislature, the Speaker of the Assembly, Sheldon Silver, a Democrat, Senate Majority Leader, Dean Skelos, a Republican, were both charged within the same couple of months, right? Or at least within the same year, certainly a couple of months, with, in effect, taking, in Skelos' case, more clearly extorting, but demanding payments from people who had business with the state government in order, demanding payments for them in order for their state government business to go forward. And Silver, something similarly, he was in effect charged with misusing his powers in order to get for private gain. They were both convicted, but they were convicted under jury instructions which were issued, which were, the jury was instructed pursuant to instructions that were written prior to McDonnell, in which in both cases, after both were convicted, in which in both cases the Second Circuit concluded that it was possible that the jury concluded that certain meetings or conversations were themselves the official act, as opposed to the official act being sponsoring a bill, voting for a bill, putting something on the legislative agenda. So in both cases, they were remanded, the convictions were vacated, new trials were held. Silver was reconvicted. Is Skelos been retried again, or is that still pending?
Yes, so they were both convicted again, and Skelos will be sentenced next week. Silver already got sentenced.
Right, and he's now, he just had his bail reduced, and he's still out on bail, but he's
still out on bail. He got bail pending appeal.
Yeah, he has one more appeal on another issue. There's another issue which looms large in federal corruption law, which was not the issue in any of these cases, which is when you have the quid pro quo, how tight has the nexus got to be between the quid and the quo? The McDonnell case and the vacates and retrials in Silver and Skelos all turned on, was there an official act? A meeting alone is not an official act. That's what comes out of this. The meeting could be part of a series of things which link up to be the official act of approving a bill. But a meeting is not an official act anymore. But the other issue latent in this is often there's not an express, I will give you this if you will give me that, but what's sometimes called the retainer theory, or retainer theory is probably the best way of describing it. The giver provides a series of gifts with the goal that ultimately the does something, and the official knows that. But there's never at one point a deal that says, here's $50,000 if you sign that bill. And so there is a Silver seeking one more round on saying the various things that benefits that I got, they were never that tightly tied to the things that I did. And that's, I think, the focus of the